Hey Jayanth, good to see you back.
Hi, Leslie. Good to see you again, man.
So I won't ask you. You can answer directly.
So it was a drive down from Hyderabad again, where we were playing nationals. Siona had a great tournament actually. She beat she won 7 out of 8 matches. Okay, beating players from all over the country: Delhi, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, uh, and Karnataka.
Nice.
And it was quite an adventurous drive. What normally takes Hyderabad to Bangalore 7.5
I
hours
thought it
door
was
to
9 hour
door.
drive, 8 to 9 hour drive.
Yeah, it for me it became 9 hours because I had a rear tire burst bang in the middle of beyond Anantapur, about 200 kilometers from Bangalore. So it was
How are the roads?
roads are pretty good actually. I mean you can cruise at 130, 135 easily.
Oh, love. You're not supposed to do that anyway.
How else do you make
I,
600
I,
kilometers in 7.5 hours, man? Seven
I
hours.
think the cops shouldn't be hearing this podcast. But anyway, lovely. So I think since you have been pacing ahead at 130, 135 kilometers per hour, let's clarify to our listeners because we have some of I mean, quite a few of our listeners are also from foreign countries. So they might think we're speaking about miles per hour. So no,
No,
no.
this
It's
kilometers,
very
yeah.
much 130 kilometers per hour, but in India, it's quite a bit because I think sort of outer limits are 110. I think, yeah, I think 110 kilometers per hour is the outer limit for most of the roads. But, talking about accelerating pace, Nvidia has been doing that. And, capitalizing on AI. So today, it's, of course, as we speak, it's become the most valuable company on
In the
earth.
world.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's like unimaginable. I don't think you or I or anybody could have imagined that Nvidia would, at any given point in time, overtake Apple.
Now, Leslie, and just this morning, I was remembering when I saw the news of Nvidia hitting what 3.34 trillion.
Yes,
Yeah, 3.334 trillion and becoming the most valuable country in the history of time. Right. I was just remembering the Mint Digital Innovation Summit 2023. Right. It was on June 9th. I distinctly remember the date. Okay, and it was that week that Nvidia hit the 1 trillion mark. Okay, and in a year, it grew 2.3x. Okay. And 1 to 3.3 trillion in a year, I think this is the fastest growth.
yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. In fact, actually, it's ironical that just a few days back, just last week, I was having a chat with Victor Peng. Now, Victor Peng, for our viewers and listeners, is the president of AMD. So obviously, he just reports to Lisa Su. Now, uh, clearly, if you talk about the kind of chip race, you have Intel, you have AMD, you have Nvidia, and then of course the smaller players, the Qualcomms, the Broadcom, the MediaTeks, etc. But look at the kind of gap between these companies. It's like hard to imagine. So when I was speaking to Victor Peng, we were obviously talking about I mean, he was talking about pervasive AI. And yes, I mean, agreed. And of course, the interview is out on LinkedIn and on Alivement for those who want to read about it. But the interesting part, the take home is very clear that for AMD or Intel to catch up with a company like Intel in terms of market capitalization,
Nvidia, you mean?
yeah, for
Catch
to
up with
catch up
Nvidia.
with for AMD and Intel,
Intel.
for Intel and AMD to catch up with a company like Nvidia in terms of market capitalization, I'm not too sure. I can't even wrap my head around that thought as of now,
Right.
because I was looking at even the revenue. If you remember, at one point in time, we used to have AMD and Nvidia, and then Intel.
Yes.
So Intel
Yes.
was at the other end.
Yeah, I mean,
Intel was like the
far
big
ahead,
daddy.
far ahead, far ahead. Yeah.
Exactly, it was the
Yeah.
big
I mean,
daddy.
there was a time when Intel's revenue was higher than rest of its competitors put together.
Absolutely. That's the whole
Right.
thing that I'm trying to
Yeah.
make. And now, if you look at it, I was looking at the 2024 financial numbers. AMD is something like, I think, $22.6 billion. Dollars. I'm
YTD, year to date?
AM,
AMD. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. AMD. Yeah.
AMD. Intel is about what, 56, I think so. And Nvidia is 60. It has crossed 60 billion.
Yeah, these are 2023 numbers.
Yes.
Yeah. AMD was about 22, Intel was 53 point something, and
And this has
Nvidia was
dropped.
60.9,
Yes.
60.9. Yeah, yeah.
And I distinctly remember that Nvidia was a 126% increase YOY.
Mm.
Whereas, because I think these figures have stuck in my mind, AMD,
The other two
AMD
fell, I
was a
think.
three, AMD was a 3% YOY decline.
Declined,
And
and Intel was 14% decline.
14% YOY. Yeah, so that is what, now this is the interesting part. All three are playing the AI game. All
Yeah,
three have got chips, but you just look at this, that of course, clearly that Nvidia has more than an 80% market share in the chips. Even in the center segment alone, I think it has more than 65% market
correct,
share. So,
correct.
I mean, it's a very formidable kind of thing. And in terms of market capitalization, this is another interesting part of it. So Intel is at the bottom
Yeah,
with 135 billion or something like that.
correct.
I mean, AMD is
AMD
twice,
250, yeah, twice Intel at about
yes,
250 odd billion
exactly, it's twice
market
Intel,
cap.
and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
3.34 trillion.
trillion.
I mean, the gap is like too much.
But yeah, market cap is also a factor of the PE ratio or the multiples, right? It's what the investors see. And I've been doing some quick check on that. The semiconductor industry average PE ratio is 42 or 43. Okay. And Intel is currently trading at 32, lower than the industry average PE ratio. Okay. Nvidia is trading at 79, which is just less than double, which is understandable because of its recent exuberance and investors, exuberance and confidence in the company and in the stock. But AMD is trading at 223, 5x the industry average. So the headroom for growth for AMD, purely from a market cap point of view, is very limited unless until the company really announces a whole new suite of products, product portfolio, markets, and revenue streams, right?
Yeah, and that seems to be a little unlikely because as of now, the kind of products that it has already see, it has already spoken about its roadmap.
Yeah,
So, to the best of my knowledge, the market has already factored in the roadmap of Intel, the
absolutely.
roadmap of AMD, and the
AMD,
roadmap of Nvidia, for that matter of
right,
fact.
right, right.
Now, the only sort of dark horse out here is the AMD paper that is being talked about, which it had spoken about in somewhere in November, where it spoke about a new kind of a chiplet design that it
Yeah,
would talk about, and perhaps. But then at the same time, to be fair, even Nvidia is working on something similar, and so
yeah.
is Intel.
Now, I'll tell you what the real dark horse is. The real dark horse could be Apple's announcement last week. Okay. If Apple, what it announced, what it essentially is doing, we discussed in the last episode, is that, it's taking Gen AI to the masses and edge AI computing. Okay. And if by that extension, and if that takes off, and if that captures, people's imagination, like how ChatGPT captured in the first 2 months, okay, and all of a sudden we are looking at edge AI chipsets, wherein the players like AMD and Qualcomm are going to be big players, okay, and and that could actually change the market, or incline it against Nvidia's this one right now. So that could be a big dark horse.
Should be an interesting thing to watch out. But then at the enterprise play, as you see, and I mean, you yourself are well aware of that. In enterprises, the reason why you have that entire kind of, sort of semi lock-in is because
Yeah,
of the NVIDIA CUDA platform. So that makes it quite difficult for, so unless the others build the interoperability between the platforms, it's going to be a little hard. They are trying. I think AMD is not part of that foundation, where the other players are trying to get some kind of interoperability out there. But we'll have to wait and watch. But as you said that the headroom is for AMD, that's an interesting point. But another interesting point, which when I was looking at it, both Nvidia and AMD are fabulous.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
Intel is a semiconductor company. So now
Correct.
that's another interesting part. And now suddenly Samsung wants to make its own chips.
Yes.
Uh,
Everyone wants to make their
Apple
own
wants
chips.
to make its own chips.
Apple's been making its own chips. It wants to,
Yeah.
put the
No, but,
pedal to the metal.
but
They
there's a
want to
slight
expedite it.
difference out here. Apple trying to make its own chips will again be fabulous. But
Yeah,
whereas
yeah,
Samsung has its own semiconductor plants. So
exactly,
now
exactly.
Just an interesting point to note. But in
How in such a short time and thanks to generative AI, the entire tech conversation moved to semiconductors and the slicing and dicing and the the granularity of semiconductor industry, right? I mean,
and
for a good
success is
two
back to
decades,
the basics.
yeah, back to the basics, exactly. For a good 2 decades, the PC industry, the mobile industry, the software was the talk of the town, and now we're back to the basics.
Yeah,
The
because
silicon,
your differentiators are hardly there at the top level because everybody knows
exactly,
the game. It's at the
exactly.
bottom level where the demand supply of chips is going to happen. So because these guys will get your Blackwell and your H100s and H200s there, and then AMD and Intel will have to get their chipsets back into the game. But it's all going to be a demand supply thing. So my sense at this point in time, I mean, with more data, probably the opinions will change over a period of time. But as of now, the way I see the market is that these both Intel and AMD will just be around to fill in the gaps. So
For in the short to medium term,
in
yes.
the short to medium
In
term,
the
and
short
that
term.
short to medium term, because no, I'm not even talking about the market cap here. I'm just talking about the kind of, 80% market share is not
Yeah,
easy to cover. You can't
absolutely.
cover it in a day or
Absolutely.
a year,
Exactly.
for that matter of fact. And Nvidia is not sitting still. So,
Exactly.
yeah, so
Exactly.
the R&D budgets, you look at the patents filed, you look at everything. In fact,
And
Intel has.
what is interesting about Nvidia is Nvidia seems to have its fingers in all AI pies. Okay,
Yes,
not just chipsets.
not
Okay, not
just.
just hardware, not just semiconductors, not at the chipset level, but beyond that as well. I mean, they are investing and releasing tools. Okay, for everything, to create your own LLMs, to develop your own LLMs, to develop your synthetic data,
So
everything much
that
beyond.
is interesting. I'm glad you brought up that because
Yeah,
NVIDIA has introduced the Nemotron for
340B
billion series of open models. It has got a base model, an instructor model, and a reward.
reward reward model.
So
Yeah,
pretty interesting. So that's another stuff that they're doing, and they're doing that for synthetic data, realizing that okay, after some point in time, you will run out of data. Another interesting paper that I was just came up, I forgot to forward it to you, but we have spoken about it in the past, so it's not anything new, but it just reconfirms this whole thing about hallucinations. So I think MIT brought up this very good point. It spoke to some of the researchers, and I mean the article just says it that please understand that all LLMs can function only because they hallucinate. Now, the point is you catch the errors and therefore you get upset about it, which is absolutely true. So, because they create everything from scratch. So, I think the more people understand that, they will also understand the strength of an LLM, but also the weakness of an LLM. And because in the enterprise space, two things enterprises will have to wait for stability and for trustworthiness. Both of them are not going to come in a jiffy. So it will just be a gradual and I think that again brings the point that humans will have to be in the loop.
correct, definitely. And to refer to the keynote speech at Matrix AI Summit that both of us were a part of 2 weeks back here in Bangalore. Arvind Tiwari, the co-chair of TIE, was talking about how hallucinations are going to be an intrinsic part,
You can't get
of
rid
the
of it. I
LLMs.
mean,
Yeah, you can't do away with it. Okay, it's going to be a feature. Look at it as a feature and then deal with it. But having said that, I did come across some very interesting research. In fact, in the next week or two, we will be having a guest who will be talking very extensively on this of how at the technology level different methodologies are being developed, okay, for to overcome this hallucination and
yeah, I mean,
and something called as catastrophic forgetting, which is
so
a intrinsic.
catastrophic forgetting has been happening, but there's also the chain of thought reasoning and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so apparently different methodologies are actually being built right now and tested at scale to overcome catastrophic forgetting of LLMs.
Yeah, but then they're learning from
Which
humans. That's exactly because
exactly.
we also, when we talk, sometimes, we have this chain of thought where we have to bring that. Like, I mean, you and I, you remember that you're mostly on the panel and I end up as a moderator most of
Moderator.
the time.
Yeah.
So for me, I have this major issue. Humans hallucinate. I'm telling you. I have this major issue. Suddenly they'll go on a tangent and I
Correct.
have to bring them back and say hello. And I just hope at that point in time that I'm not hallucinating because there's a very good tendency that you can, get it drawn into the discussion and suddenly you realize, hey, hello, I'm
Correct.
discussing something that I'm not supposed to be discussing. So it's that lovely Hindi
So
saying, na, कहना क्या चाहते हो?
कहना क्या चाहते हो? Exactly. So just for the benefit of our audience, um, catastrophic forgetting is a term that is used in the large language models. If you're using generative AI, we talk about hallucination of LLMs, right? It's because after a few steps, after a few questions, the large language models have this habit of forgetting or forgetting what's been asked 2 or 3 steps behind, and that's why they cannot be coherent. You cannot yet have very coherent long-term interactive conversations unless a very specific enterprise specific data-based RAG-based LLM has been created for a very specific purpose, be it for customer support or marketing collaterals development or stuff like that. So LLMs have something called as catastrophic forgetting. That's right now a part of the technology itself, and that contributes to hallucination.
So yeah, of course. I mean, Jayanth referred to RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, and of course you have fine tuning. So fine tuning brings you up to steam. RAG makes you more relevant, the conversation more contextual and relevant. So these are things. And talking about things like RAG, catastrophic forgetting, chain of thought reasoning, and all, viewers and listeners, the reason why we keep on insisting on that because that brings us to our next topic, which is the Coursera Global Skills Report 2024. Now, the interesting part out here, I was looking at some of the stats that this report brought out. In 2022, India's overall skills proficiency slipped 4 places, and it was ranked 68th globally. In Asia, India was 19th, the Asia Pac region. In 2023, I don't have the Asia Pac ranking. I couldn't find it, but it was ranked 60th. Okay, now just look at it. 68 to then it was ranked higher at 60. In 2024, that's this year, India, and this report just came out in, I think it was June 14th, if I'm not mistaken. So India ranks 87th in the and it ranks 19 17, I think so, on the regional rankings. Japan has risen from 5th to 2nd in the global rankings. Now just look at it. And it is the only APAC nation to feature among the top 10. So India is not there, despite all our talent, talk about talent and skills, etc. Singapore has risen from 16th to the 12th. Now, the interesting part out here is what. So, one thing I think for the benefit of our viewers and listeners, because even I was very curious to know the typical thought that crosses your mind when you say, okay, it was 60 in 2022 and now it has dropped to 87. So it's a clear drop of 27 places. It's not exactly, that's not the way to look at it, perhaps, because Coursera clarified that India is attracting more new learners, which would have impacted its skills rankings compared to previous years. So we need to hedge that a little, that a lot more new
New
learners are coming
learners.
into it.
Yeah.
Now,
In fact, the number of new learners grew by 16 times. I mean, between the last year and this year, 2022 and 2023, India had a 1,648% growth in terms of new learners. And that's
yeah.
why the skill ranking fell, because there are more and more new people joining. And here's another thing that I took from the report, Leslie. Coursera, of the entire world, all countries, all continents, had 140 million plus learners, of which India had 24.6 million.
24.6
Yeah,
million.
which
Yes.
is close to like 17 or 18%. Okay.
Yeah.
17 or 18% of Coursera's global learners are from India.
And the median age also, I was having a look at that. That's
30.
30. And
Whereas the
39.
global median age is 33.
Correct. And 39% women learners, which shows
Yes.
the kind of disparity. The 33% women learners in STEM
In
and
STEM,
50% learning on mobile.
one of the highest women in STEM countries, India is actually. Yeah, out
Correct.
of 24.6, one third are women.
Yeah, and APAC region itself leads in digital literacy with 49.2 million readers,
Yeah,
representing 3.9% of the total population. That's interesting. Talking about this gender disparity, which you just spoke about, I have some stats here that North America and European regions have a gender gap of 5 percentage points. APAC has 7 percentage point gap in gender enrollment. Even but out of that also nations like the Philippines and Thailand have already achieved parity. Yeah?
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
little of a skewed thing.
Southeast
Yes.
Asia has achieved parity. Yes.
Absolutely. The largest disparity, which I think is sort of a no-brainer, was found in the Middle East and North
Middle East.
Africa, 13 percentage points between female learners and women in the general population.
Yeah,
So, in interesting kind of conversations around the entire thing. I don't know, for the benefit of our viewers and listeners, if you give me a second, I will just look at the. I'm just sharing the top skills and the top target roles. So I'll just mention a few. So surprisingly, one is HTML and CSS.
yeah,
This is after a long time I'm hearing the cascading style sheets. I'm that I'm still surprised that it's one of the top skills, but it's interesting. So of course, the top target role is that of a web developer. There's applied machine learning, which in network engineers, Python programming, regression, ML algorithms. Blockchain is still among the top skills.
in India,
Distributed
yes.
computing architecture, programming principles, algorithms, software architecture, and some of the top target roles include network engineer, software developer, machine learning engineer, data engineer, securities and commodities
Yeah.
trader, marketing associate, data analyst. That's pretty interesting. What's your sense of this? Because the methodology seems to be very rigorous. So
Yeah,
I've looked at it.
I think this report's methodology is quite rigorous, and I think it's a good this one of the sample, a good reflection of what's going on in the country. I mean, even if you look at empirical data, the off the cuff conversations that we have of the people coming on board. I mean, we keep having these offline discussions, right? From chief executives to senior investors, partners in VC firms, to people in fresh out of business schools, and not even with technology background or engineering background, are all trying to understand and do a course in the AI, and at least in India we see that a lot, right? We keep getting that question. I mean, just last week, again, someone who's read our book AI Rising, he's an IMT Ghaziabad MBA pass out. He was saying, I love 22, 23-year old. I love how easy to read it is, and we can understand what AI is. And I'm from a non-tech background. So the inquisitiveness and the curiosity and the effort that people are putting in, it's very clearly there. We see that around, and this report reflects that, at least what we're seeing around us in India, for sure. And 20 years ago, this was the case when internet was new and C, C++, Java was new. We had the gentleman from NIIT, one of the founders, here, and that institution is an example of building on the tech learning thirst and hunger of the Indian masses, at large. So that I think has always been there.
Correct. And even, time and again, when we look at these skill sets, and when we look at, the sort of that immediate fear that we have about, our jobs going away to automation and AI, time and again, I, bring back the same example that we were talking about just before this podcast, is that way back when I, started my dad's time, SSC or matriculation was the minimum. So it was 10 standard pass and you were sorted in life. You would get a job.
Yeah, you would get a
And
job. Yeah, your life
yeah.
was sorted. Correct.
By the time I finished my graduation, it was already like, okay, graduation and you're sorted. So we didn't really have to go for the master's or PhD. Those who went for the master's and PhD became professors, and this it went into a very different kind of field. But we were sorted. So even if we we did our master's, that was a bonus. If we did our PhD, outstanding kind of.
Yes,
And
yes.
then, of course, we had the usual suspect, doctor, engineer, and IITs. But look at the generation after that. It's master's, PhD. So those have become like the threshold levels. Okay, you have to at least achieve that much, which is now
That's
what.
become the hygiene. That's become the hygiene. And
Now
now
listen.
beyond that, it's every few years certification course, vocational course, reskilling yourself. And I think that's becoming the norm. Every 5 years, reskilling yourself, regardless of which level of the corporate hierarchy or the management level you are. I think that's becoming the norm.
Yeah, I mean, the point is that ongoing education is there and change is the only constant.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, we always say, na, in when you come to payments, it's a caveat emptor or buyer beware. Here you'll have to say learner beware. Study and continuously study. I mean, you are responsible for your own education. So it's not just your company. Your company may give you certain courses, may recommend certain things. Like just in the morning, one of my I mean, we both started our careers together. So one of my colleagues called me up and said, Leslie, what course should I do in AI? He wanted to do a course from a very prestigious institution. I, I was, trying to resist my. Then after I just got a little irritated. I said, okay, what do you want to do with the degree? I said, because by the time you finish the degree, everything would be outdated. So you'll still have to study. So I said, rather you take some online courses, and if it's not going to it, because you need to continuously learn, read, reread, and that same Alvin Toffler one, which I'm very fond of saying, that it's not about the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who can't read or write. It will be those who can't learn,
Unlearn.
unlearn and relearn.
Yeah.
So I think that is applicable. And of course, now before we conclude,
Yeah, I think on that topic, a message to our listeners. Again, just to re-emphasize, if you are wondering which course you need to do for in AI, I think the question that Leslie asked is extremely pertinent. I think you need to reverse engineer. I think you need to ask yourself the question: why is it that you want to learn AI? What is it that you want to do with it? And then basis that go and either do a course or see your objective is to learn on AI, and the learning can come in multiple ways, and a certified course from an institute is only one of those ways. Okay, there are more experiential ways. If you're willing to intern with a startup, or even work with a startup which is doing something really good in AI, or even in the research team of a company, or in a product team of any company, or in your own company, maybe you should do that. Okay, there are multiple ways of learning, but it all depends on the objective. Probably you need to reverse engineer, ask yourself the question: why is it that you want to learn AI? Where is it that in this AI wave that you want to be? Okay, and then basis that, go back and figure out your learning path. And there are multiple learning paths.
basically, don't put the cart before the horse. AI is
Exactly.
always a tool. So let's not really forget this. And not everybody wants to become a computer science graduate.
Exactly.
We need electrical engineers. We need mechanical engineers. We
No.
require civil engineers. We require data scientists. We require artists. And believe me, foundational models and LLMs won't be able to do every task.
No, and let me take this opportunity to harp once more. I don't think I've ever done this on this podcast, but I've done this enough in the industry and on during my speeches in various conferences, is that India lacks something that we call product marketeers. People with the technical aptitude, but also enough business and consumer understanding and sales understanding. If you can be that bridge, a product marketeer or a data marketeer, someone who's a bridge who can speak both to the engineers, and in this case, the AI engineers and the data scientists, and also the business teams. Okay, you are going to be a very valuable professional. And India, as such, the Indian tech and the Indian tech product ecosystem lacks these professionals. I mean, and if you look at Silicon Valley, if you look at the successful global technology companies, okay, Steve Jobs is a good example of a very good product marketer. Okay, he's never coded anything in his life, but he understands what software and
He was a
hardware and
designer,
technology can do.
basically.
Exactly. So if you can evolve that in the evolving AI era, I think that would be great. I mean, I was there, I was that for the product, I was a product marketer in the mobile ecosystem. And I remember we were just three of us in the entire country between Sony Ericsson, Samsung, Nokia, Motorola, and LG, five big companies. Okay. And post that, even now I see India lacks that, skill set. So probably you might want to look at becoming that.
So, viewers and listeners, I think we have given you enough fodder for thought. Nvidia has become the most valuable company.
Valuable company.
By the time the next podcast happens, probably Apple would replace it or Microsoft would replace. We
Microsoft
never
might.
know because the pecking order is going to keep on changing. But the point, I think the point remains, regardless of whether the pecking order changes or not, that AI and Gen AI is here to stay. It definitely it has its own limitations, but we need to work around those limitations. There's no turning the clock back, and we have to figure out how we reskill and upskill ourselves. And we'll leave you with that thought. If you disagree, please let us know. We'd love to hear that too.
Exactly.
And yeah, because I think it's all about having an engaging audience. So, folks, have a lovely weekend. And Jayanth, wish you also a lovely weekend. Bye.
Thanks, Leslie, to you too. Bye.